Two men in their late 30s. One, Bergamaschi, a brunette furniture mover who wrote memoirs of a sordid childhood and adolescence that sold modestly in France and Germany. The other, Johann Murk, a notorious clinical psychiatrist and best-selling author who'd spent the previous decade interviewing and writing about the quote-unquote victims of alien abduction, exited the Taconic State Parkway in a beige D100 pickup and followed a narrow road along a tunnel-like corridor of birch, pine, and elm. Occasionally, on the left or the right, in the perpetual sylvan twilight, a grim-looking double-wide protruded from the earth. As often as not, a pickup truck was parked nearby. Perhaps somewhere on the adjoining property, a satellite dish pointed at the sky. Their destination was the home of a young man, a painter with an expressionist name, Mark Finger, who'd been scheduled to have a solo show at a well-regarded gallery on West Broadway in Soho, but at the last moment backed out and then, as if in some melodramatic movie from the 1950s, burnt all his paintings. But why? According to Finger, extraterrestrials had been visiting him, like uncles or distant cousins, since his childhood. In the course of their interaction, the aliens had shown him things, images from a vast archive that was essentially the history of human civilization. He'd seen the crucifixion, the Wright Brothers at Kitty Hawk, the construction of Ai-Khanoum, as well as the Great Pyramids, the Battle of Somme, of Leningrad, of Lepanto, the Warsaw Ghetto, the beheading of Robespierre, an endless list of events and catastrophes that were, according to him, imprinted directly onto his mind. These events became the subjects of his paintings. The very idea of painting was suggested to him by the aliens. Understandably or not, he'd begun to think of himself as separate, a refugee from the human race. The only way to survive, he told himself, was to burn the paintings, every last one of them. Bergamaschi initially thought Finger's actions were admirable, a purely aesthetic gesture. After all, everyone knew that the duty of the artist was to make his life and work incomprehensible. But then he came to understand that Finger actually believed that the aliens were real. Bergamaschi, who'd recently moved the freshly divorced Johann Murk into a large apartment near the cloisters in Upper Manhattan, thought the psychiatrist should meet the painter. Was it out of some angelic impulse that he endeavored to bring the healer to the sick and suffering man? In the back of his mind, he thought he might write about their interaction. The world-famous Johann Murk, an ambiguous figure to say the least, might be revealed at the hands of Bergamaschi as a saint, a lunatic, or more likely, a charlatan. Originally from Missouri, Mark Finger preferred forlorn, uninhabited spaces to vertiginous, sprawling cities. He was staying in a long-neglected farmhouse, gray with white shutters. It rose above rutted fallow fields, the only structure visible for miles. An old oak stood nearby. From its silent gray branches, a frayed rope swung in the wind. Finger, in his mid-20s, stood on the front porch as Bergamaschi steered his truck along the dirt driveway. Dark hair swept back from his forehead. Beneath a black t-shirt, broad shoulders and a narrow waist were visible. Except for a discolored, cracked front tooth, there was a symmetry to his face and body. Bergamaschi rolled down his window and observed the rhapsodic blue of the sky, the vapor trail of a fighter jet, the rustle of leaves in the wind. It was at the most inopportune times that the world revealed a strange, undeniable consonance. Finger ran down the steps, across the lawn, and stood outside of the truck waiting for the men to get out. He was laughing. He pointed at Murk. "I know who you are. I've read your books." Murk climbed out of the truck, shut its door, smiled, and began to laugh as well. Bergamaschi looked across the cab of the truck. "What's so funny?" Murk. "Certain essential aspects of the world are accessible only through laughter." Finger. "Sometimes fear is laughter." Murk. "To laughter you can only oppose laughter." Bergamaschi followed the two men as they walked toward the house. He thought that Finger had the humility of a man who knew he was about to die. I want them to leave me alone. I've had enough. I reject them. The three men sat at the kitchen table, drinking from cans of beer. Murk drummed his fingers on the tabletop. On some men, acne scars are almost a kind of decoration. Think of a statue, pitted by time or disaster. Johann, with his handsome pockmarked, olive-skinned face, was one of these men. Of all the abductees I've encountered, more than half of them have expressed the desire to be left alone. It's the same with mystics or visionaries. Exposure to another reality can be unbearable. Bergamaschi stood up from the table and pointed toward the kitchen window. Who the hell is that? A woman, barefoot in a white linen suit, crossed the lawn. Her hair was black and gleaming, her skin ivory, her eyes like bodies of water reflecting the sky. In her left hand, held between thumb and index finger, a paperback copy of Murk's latest book, Interventions in Abductions. As she walked, plants broke through the earth and rose to attention. Their flowering was violent. The colors jarred like wrong notes played on a piano. Grass sprouted at her feet. Fog rose in front, behind her. She did not speak, but the men heard her voice.
To survive, you must transform the nature of all that exists and enter a completely new order of things. Debasement has been your fundamental principle of existence. The best painting, the best art, is initiatory. It heralds a new world and helps bring it into being. We must guide you to a zone in which a new conception and a new birth can take place.
The woman continued walking until she was no longer visible. Bergamaschi once again sat down at the table. In the instant that followed, the men were without memories, without plans. An interval of unknown duration passed as time rebuilt itself around them. Finally, Murk began to scribble in a notebook. He spoke in a hoarse voice. There is a taxonomy of aliens. We know of the greys, the lizards, the little doctors, and the ones like her called the Nordics. Sometimes they appear to our sensory organs as over 7 feet tall. Finger was slumped in his chair. They're in the barn, they're in the trees. He gulped his beer. You hear noises at night. You might think it was crickets or toads or birds, but it's them. They won't leave until I start painting again. They've made that clear. He stood and walked to the refrigerator, pulled open the door, retrieved another beer. He pointed his chin toward the kitchen door. If I drink myself to death or blow my head off, burn this place down, there'll be shit out of luck. He gulped half the beer, then paused. That ain't what I want. I want to be... He grimaced. I want to be normal. Bergamaschi closed his dark eyes, rubbed a hand over the black stubble on his cheeks. Why don't you just start painting again, Mark? I'd do anything to get rid of them. Johann closed his notebook. Come with us when we go back to the city. Leave this place, Mark. Finger shrugged. I'm like a criminal, perpetually on the run. From them. He placed the empty can of beer on the table in front of him. I'm sick of running. Let's go shoot some guns. It'll clear our heads, make us all feel better. Murk put his right hand against the dashboard and braced himself. His finger jerked the wheel and steered his pickup truck down a rutted dirt road. They passed remnants of a shade tobacco field, then the charred skeleton of a tobacco drying shed. Like a sullen teenager, Murk frowned and stared straight ahead. I always promised myself that I would never fire a gun. That's pretty silly. Finger turned and grinned. Just a little farther now, Dr. Murk. The truck hit a rut, and the three men's heads nearly banged against its roof. Should we be firing guns after drinking alcohol? It's the best time to fire guns. The type of people I grew up with were always armed. He lifted his hand from the steering wheel and tapped one of the rifles affixed to the gun rack behind him. These are tools, like a paintbrush or hammer. He pulled up a pant leg. A derringer was visible in a boot holster. Murk sighed. We shape our tools, and thereafter our tools shape us. Finger laughed. Whatever. Wedged against the passenger side door, Bergamaschi was bored.
Why is it, Mark, that the aliens are so intent that you in particular should paint?
You heard her. They want the world to know that our technologies enslaved us and compelled us to participate in our own destruction.
Yeah, but why you?
Finger turned toward Bergamaschi and shrugged. No clue. Have a feeling it's just their cover story. They're after something else. Doc Murk might know what that is. He patted Murk on the back. Stop shaking. I'm about to put a loaded gun in your hands. Up ahead, like a beaver's dam, a small mountain of brush blocked the road. Here we go, gentlemen. Finger stepped out of the truck, shut the door, leaned against it, and pulled a pack of cigarettes out of the pocket of his t-shirt. The sky was darkening. The holiday feel of an impending thunderstorm penetrated the air. He took off running. 30 yards away from the truck, he went about setting up a dozen empty green Genesee cream ale cans. He jogged back to the truck, opened a door, removed 2 rifles from the gun rack, and laid them on the hood of the truck. He pulled a gym bag from behind the driver's seat, removed a loaded magazine, popped it into an M1, and handed it to Bergamaschi. Patti Hearst's favorite weapon. Give it a try, Mr. Bergamaschi. As Finger and Murk stepped aside, Bergamaschi put it to his shoulder. He pulled the trigger. There was no evidence of the .30 caliber bullet striking anywhere near the row of cans. He lowered the weapon, rolled his shoulders, and once again took aim. As he did, he recited,
When there are no gods, the phantoms reign.
He began firing. One after another, cans flew from the log as if pulled by a string. An enormously tall, thin, blonde-haired figure wearing a white tunic-like garment and fluorescent orange running shoes wandered in the distance, slightly to the right of where Finger had placed the targets. Finger held a .44 Magnum at arm's length. The gun discharged. Beer bottles exploded in the distance.
That's Zeus.
He hardly ever shows his face. Bergamaschi sat on the truck's tailgate drinking a beer.
What happens if you shoot him?
I'm pretty sure he dies.
Why don't they intervene directly, cure disease, stop the aging process, disarm the nuclear bombs, clean up the polluted oceans, etc.?
Murk held a beer in each hand and drank first from one, then the other.
As Mark has said, they may in fact have other goals aside from our salvation. Some insist that their only interest is in maintaining themselves. Their true work is to use humans to propagate their own species with what have been called hybrids.
He guzzled more beer.
One might look at those who run the world. They could easily be described as inhuman.
Finger snorted and once more fired the Magnum. Murk emptied a beer can, then crushed it in his fist.
When they first started visiting you, did bright lights appear outside your window, Mark, accompanied by a strange hum?
Yep.
Did they dematerialize you, Mark? Yep. Did they transport you through walls or windows?
Windows.
Did they take you to a mothership with gleaming, modern appurtenances, or to a room that seemed like an ancient shrine or altar? Ancient shrine. Did they perform medical interventions?
Yep.
Harvest your sperm or take tissue samples?
Sperm.
Did their ship, as far as you understood, come from the stars or the oceans? Oceans.
Lightning flashed. Claps of thunder quickly followed. A bit like a priest, a bit like a ballerina, Zeus wandered in the distance. His voice cleared a space in their brains.
What we seek is neither thick nor thin, neither short nor long, neither flame nor liquid, neither colored nor dark, neither wind nor ether, doesn't stick, is without taste, without smell, without eyes, without ears, without breath, without mouth, without measure, without an inside, without an outside. It does not eat and is not eaten.
Murk, holding his head in his hands, ran back to the truck. He grabbed the M1, put it to his shoulder, and pointed it at Zeus.
We are not able to endure these creatures. Like Semele will go up in a puff of smoke. I have a splitting headache. Let's go. Back to the farmhouse. Back to the city. Please. My head.
The thunder drowned out the gunshots. Or maybe it was the other way around. Rain hammered the hood of the truck. The world turned to water. Upon returning to Manhattan, both Bergamaschi and Murk were bedridden for a week with headaches and fevers. Finger, on the other hand, was afflicted by a kind of hyper-restlessness. He didn't sleep and drank around the clock. He stayed with Murk for 3 weeks. Then a girlfriend, who after the burning of the paintings and the end of his art career had become an ex-girlfriend. He stayed with her for 2 weeks, then with Bergamaschi for 10 days. After that he disappeared. For weeks following his departure, Bergamaschi dreamt of him. He thought often of Finger's pathetic, even poignant desire, which was both commonplace and exceptional in a city like New York. I want to be normal. The dreams usually ended with a vision of a vast conflagration. One morning upon waking, Bergamaschi wrote down the details of his dream in a notebook he kept by his bed. The house burnt in the middle of all that empty space like a torch. Windows popped, exploding outward, broken glass tinkling like ice cubes on the frozen lawn. It seemed as if the house had been designed for only one purpose, to burn dramatically on a summer night beneath a sky full of stars. The old oak went up along with the house. The rope acted as a wick in the tree, illumined by orange-red flames bent in the wind as if it was dancing. A flaming branch fell on the hood of the truck, then another. Soot rained down from the sky. Plasma-like flame crawled upward from the windows, searching among the eaves.